Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today, I will be welcoming a writer, producer, director. His name is Bill Froelich. He co-wrote and directed the 1987 horror comedy classic Return to Horror High, a gem of a cult film starring another guest of mine, Laurie Lethan. And also Darcy DeMoss is in it as well. And he also wrote, produced, directed a lot of classic TV shows. Heart to Heart, Scarecrow, Mrs. King, the new Mike Hammer, MacGyver. He also worked on Freddy's Nightmares. I mean, he's got an impressive resume of television as well. I'm having him on the show to talk about all that stuff today. This is our pre-Easter show. Tomorrow is Easter. So, here is my interview with Bill Froelich. Hey, Bill.
Hi, Tommy.
Welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's such a great honor. Thank you for taking the time today.
Well, have you actually started? Are we broadcasting? Or
yes, we are.
We are. Okay. Well, this is great. I'm actually very excited to kind of go back through the curtains of time for a splat from the past with you.
Oh, thank you very much. So, going back in time, did you gravitate toward TV and movies early on in your childhood?
Well, I certainly think so. My parents told me that the first movie they took me to when I was 2 years old, I was a rather active little kid, and they were afraid they were going to have to leave the theater probably because I'd want to be running around and making noise. But they said as soon as the movie came on, I curled my feet underneath myself, sat on that chair, and didn't make a sound for 2 hours. I apparently was enthralled. So I think that started it. And I found myself actually being very drawn to certainly loving to watch television shows and movies all the way through fond memories through junior high and high school. And actually it was in high school that I decided, hey, I think this is what I'd kind of like to take a shot at doing for a living. Mm-hmm. And that kind of set my path forward from there.
Do you remember?
Well, it was pretty strange because I grew up in Pittsburgh, primarily, Pennsylvania, mm-hmm. and Hollywood and California were the furthest thing from anybody's mind. But my parents were extremely supportive, and so I carried on from there.
Oh, that's good. What are your favorite movies of all time?
Well, that list is quite extensive, and I'm always adding to it. There are many movies that I've seen time and time again, but I clearly love Frank Capra's "It's a Wonderful Life," mm-hmm. Casablanca, To Kill a Mockingbird. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is one of my favorites. I probably saw that about 16 times in high school. Mm-hmm. And years later, when I met Paul Newman and did a feature-length racing documentary with him and spent 3 months traveling across the U.S. and Canada with him and became friends, I told him, I said, I love that film. I saw it 16 times. He said, what, are you nuts? He said, why'd you see it 16 times? I said, well, I really liked it. He went, yeah, we really liked making that film, too. I'd say some oldies but goodies, The Great Escape and The Magnificent Seven. There's a great French film that I love called, the English version of it is called And Now My Love. I love the Forsyth film Local Hero with Burt Lancaster and Peter Riegert.
That's a good one.
Both of whom I was fortunate enough to meet and become friendly with later. But my list really is quite extensive. I love a lot of the new movies coming out and have been out for a long time. The Godfather films. And there are actually a number of some what one might call romantic comedies and comedies that I've loved, like The American President and Tootsie and Notting Hill and things like so. And I love really good thrillers, really like Ronin, and a lot of thrillers. So, as you can probably see, my taste is rather eclectic. It's across the board. And I like even crazy, silly stuff like Monty Python and the Holy Grail and Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles.
Oh, yeah.
Always up for a laugh.
Yeah, that's a great list. I like all those movies, too. So you're originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
So after... Go ahead.
I came out to Hollywood, came out to California to try to break in after I graduated from college.
Mm-hmm. You went to Ithaca College.
I did. In Ithaca, New York. Absolutely gorgeous location, and I had a great time there. Really learned a lot, made a lot of good friends that I'm still really good friends with to this day. And many people from the School of Communications are now kind of filtered all throughout the entertainment business, so it's quite exciting.
And did you major in film?
My degree technically was like television, radio, cinematography, mostly at the time television, radio for what was offered. But I always knew that that I was going to head out to Hollywood to make motion pictures. A lot of people who were in my graduating classes on either side of me and my class were mostly going into radio and television broadcasting. Mm-hmm. I had been a professional disc jockey at the college during my college years and really loved it. And they thought I was going to go into radio and television broadcasting, a lot of my friends. But I always knew I wanted to go out to California and do my best to take a shot at breaking into the film and television business. Along that line, I was very fortunate that Rod Serling was a professional in residence at Ithaca College. He and his family had a house on Lake Cayuga, and when he would come back from Hollywood to kind of get away for a while from all the writing and producing that he was doing, he loved coming back to Ithaca and teaching us students. I was very fortunate to take his seminars for all 4 years that I was at Ithaca College, and I became friends with him, and he was just a fantastic guy, so sharp, so bright, but also just a regular, down-to-earth guy. And he kind of took me under his wing and gave me a lot of advice and welcomed me as a visitor, he and his wife Carol, to their home in Pacific Palisades, California, when I came out. And he started giving me some good pointers on how to get started, so I felt very fortunate along that line. I still look up to him. He's an astronomical talent. Mm-hmm. And a lovely man. And we lost him far too soon. And sadly, his wife Carol just recently passed, and she had maintained his legacy for all the years in between. But I was very, very fortunate.
Mm-hmm. What year did you move to Los Angeles?
I came out to L.A. in 1974.
74.
And, yeah. And my the first job that I got was actually working part-time in the Universal Studios mailroom. And I did that for a few months part-time, working like maybe once a week or once every other week. Mm-hmm. And eventually in a few months, that became full-time. And I spent about 9 months in the Universal City mailroom, kind of an appropriate gestation period. Because at Universal, you could meet, you delivered mail to everyone. And at that time, the mailroom was in like literally like a mobile home trailer. Mm-hmm. But we delivered mail to everybody, from Lou Wasserman, who was the CEO of MCA Universal, all the way down to the guys in the paint shop and the mechanic shop. There were movie stars on the lot, big producers and directors. You delivered all their mail, so you tried to meet as many people as you could, just to find a way to get into the business, because the entertainment business is quite a lot about who you know, who will open a door for you, who will give you a hand up. Nobody gets in by themselves.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. A lot of people started out in the mail rooms of famous studios before they got into the industry.
Yeah, and today, the mail rooms that are used in that way are more the mail rooms of the big talent agencies.
Yeah, it's all different now.
Yeah.
You were...
That was a very fun time. I met some very cool and fun people there, and was able to sneak on the. I delivered Alfred Hitchcock's mail as one example. I was able to sneak on the set of Family Plot and watch him direct Bruce Dern, Barbara Harris, and kind of learn a few tricks from him. And that was pretty neat.
Yeah, that's like a career highlight right there. You were an associate producer on a Katharine Hepburn movie called Ollie Ollie Oxenfree.
I was. That came about because the director, Richard Cola, had an office at Universal, and he had directed some feature films with Burt Reynolds and Hugh Brenner, and he directed some really good television movies. He was a respected director, and he wanted to branch out with this independent film, and he had Katharine Hepburn attached, and he was someone I met from delivering his mail, and I kind of helped him get in touch with some people who helped put in some extra money to the film, and so he brought me aboard as I was originally going to be my title was going to be co-producer, and I actually brought my friend at the time along. We were both going to be co-producers, but we ended up getting the associate producer title because there was a contractual situation with the one of the other people who had the producer title. But it was a great baptism with fire. Got to work on budgets and location scouts and work directly with Katharine Hepburn and be involved in actually all aspects of production. It was a blast, and it was a great learning experience. Talk about having your feet held to the fire. From the mailroom, literally one day to the next day, starting on this independent feature film.
Yeah, so you had a good experience with Katharine Hepburn?
She was fantastic. I mean, to this day, she is still, to me, she is the most opinionated person I ever met in my life, but in a good way. She was very confident about what she believed in and what she knew, but she also would listen to you if you had a point to make that might have been opposite of what she was saying. But what a confident woman, what a consummate actress and professional. It was really great working with her. She had a great sense of humor. Here we are, all of us were working with this legendary star. She's been a major star since like 1939, and she wanted us to call her Kate. And most of us, we just couldn't. We had such respect for her. We started calling her Miss Hepburn. And then she kind of really liked that. But one morning, to kind of loosen things up in the morning, everybody was hustling around we were just a little bit behind in schedule, and we were hustling to get things going. And she made an announcement, said, I don't want you all to be concerned with me. She said, I'm just a crotchety old bitch before I get my coffee at 10 o'clock in the morning. And so she had quite a sense of humor, but a really classy woman. She knew when to let the humor go. There was a funny incident where we needed to have some special stage space on the Paramount Studios lot because of the nature of that particular sound stage. Our offices and studio space were on the Culver City slot, the front building of which was Tara in Gone with the Wind. And we were doing this film at the same time that they were doing the King Kong remake starring Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange. And so they were right next door to us. And when we needed to get on the Paramount Studios lot, we were an independent film. We were non-union in some of the aspects of other people who were involved, so we were not allowed technically to be on that lot. And initially, the Teamsters, as they were following contractual orders, didn't want us on the lot. So Katharine Hepburn and myself and a couple other people, Katharine Hepburn said, let's get a couple bottles of wine, and I will walk these guys around the lot. We'll have some glass of wine with them, and I'll chat with them. And they were so delighted to be engaged in a discussion with Katharine Hepburn that they let us on the lot and said, what the hell, go ahead. And we were able to get the process shots that we needed. She was amazing. She played an old junk lady who collected junk. And the film was about an adventure that she and two young boys and a hot air balloon and their dog end up taking. And it was quite an endeavor. We actually landed that balloon with Katharine Hepburn and the kids and the dog in it on the sound stage at the Hollywood Bowl with the LA Philharmonic playing the 1812 overture for the end of the picture. So it was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's good. You co-wrote and produced the TV movie of the week, If Things Were Different. How did that come about?
That was absolutely a delightful experience. Became really good friends with Suzanne Plachette, who was so funny and so talented. I really miss her. Mm-hmm. And it came about because prior to that experience, I had taken a slight detour from my desire to write and direct and produce and follow that line. I was offered an opportunity after the Katharine Hepburn film to join MTM Enterprises. That's Mary Tyler Moore Enterprises.
Right.
And Tinker, her husband and the president of the company, brought me aboard and wanted me to be, they were expanding into drama series and TV movies. And he wanted me to be the director of drama development and production, working under him and the vice president, Stu Irwin. So I decided, hey, this is an opportunity to learn the television business at the feet of the master. So I took it. And I briefly met Suzanne Plachette at that time, but not just in passing, because I really was involved in the drama shows. But after I left MTM, I co-wrote this script, If Things Were Different, did it on spec with my then friend and partner at the time, Mark Lasson. Mm-hmm. And we wrote it on spec, but I had made all these contacts while spending 2.5 years at MTM. And so I reached out to Bob Banner's production company. Bob was a legendary figure in the business. And sent the script over to them. And a producer there who was under contract with Bob, Clyde Phillips, a very talented guy who was also a writer and a novelist. Clyde's done such series now as Dexter, and a very talented guy. Clyde and Bob read the script, loved it, and I said to them, you know, we really need to get somebody attached so that the network will give us a go-ahead. They fully agreed. They had their ideas also. And we came down to either Suzanne Plachette or Elizabeth Montgomery. And we decided on Suzanne Plachette. We sent the script over to, it was very interesting that we called up Suzanne's agent. And I think her agent was Bodie Boatwright at the time. And her agent said, Suzanne just told me that she's not doing anything. She doesn't want to do any work because her husband says her husband was Tommy Gallagher then, and said she's been working too hard, she's tired, you can't do any more work for a while. And so Suzanne had told her agent, don't send any more work or I'll fire you. So we asked her agent, would you please just read the script? Well, she read the script. She loved it. She called up Suzanne and said, I'm sending you a script. Read this script. If you don't like it, then I'm firing you. And Suzanne read the script, absolutely loved it, walked into her little breakfast room the next day, the script down in front of her husband, and with a smile said, I'm going to do this movie. You can get divorced if you want. So that's how that started. Once we got Suzanne committed, we took Suzanne and the script and the project to CBS. They read it. They loved it. Very few notes, which is unusual in Hollywood, in both the television and the film business. We made a few of those changes, and they were actually good notes, good changes. And they gave us a go-ahead right away, and we started filming. Hired a guy named Robert Lewis as the director, and is still to this day one of the most enjoyable, fun experiences I've had in making a movie or a television series. Not all the experiences have been great. Some have been like walking through hell barefoot. But this was fantastic. Great cast,
Yeah, another guest of mine, Dan Shore, played Eric in it.
Yes, absolutely. Dan was great in that.
Great guy.
We were all a lot younger at that time, but really liked working with Dan.
Yeah, he's a great guy. So did you stay in television at that point because the money was better than the movies?
Well, one of the things about the entertainment business when you are trying to build your reputation, when you're trying to build your foundation, is you need to kind of keep your eyes open for walking through the doors that open for you, unless it's something that just seems really detrimental. So that movie, when it came out for CBS, ended up being the highest rated television movie for CBS for that entire season. So my then writing partner and I became very hot. So it made sense that we keep pitching and writing television movies, which we did. So the doors of television, because of my MTM experience in television, and because of this film, just really started opening up for me. I never at that time stopped trying to enter the world of feature films, because that was my first love and desire, to do feature films. But, you go where some of the open doors are because you would like to be able to get checks that are cashable so you can eat. So sometimes it came down to something as simple as that. And because we had some heat on us as, hey, these are up-and-coming guys, it was good to try to take advantage of that. So television movies eventually led into to doing television series, and that opened up quite another door, writing pilots for new series and becoming showrunner. I became showrunner and co-showrunner on a number of series. In the beginning, helping to start the Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer series with Stacey Keach, and then I was one of the producers on Scarecrow and Mrs. King with Kate Jackson and Bruce Boxleitner. And from there, became a co-showrunner of the original MacGyver series. We were brought on to MacGyver in the first season. Was still trying to find its sea legs, which is very typical of a lot of television series. And it struggled both in the ratings and somewhat creatively. It was a terrific concept created by Lee David Zlatoff, and he had written the pilot script. And but for whatever reasons that I'm not sure of actually to this day, he left the production to move on to other things during the first season. And I'm not sure exactly why. He's a very talented writer and writer-producer. So we ended up being brought in by Paramount to kind of help right the ship, so to speak, along with everyone else who was working on the series, of course. And so that's how I got involved in MacGyver. And then just kept moving, forward through the years with other television series, some of which were really quite interesting to jump into because of how different they were. Did a series in New York. It was one of the first series actually shot in called Legloak, that starred Margaret Colin and future Academy Award winner Frances McDormand. Also did I was one of the co-showrunners on a series called Fine Romance that we shot all over Europe, and it was the first ever international co-production of a television series. We had so many executive chefs from companies involved in that film. It was like swimming around in a boiling soup, but it was still fun.
Nice. When you were on MacGyver, were you on the same time as John Rich and Henry Winkler?
Absolutely. What ABC had done, or what the networks did quite a lot in those days, and actually still today, there are people who rise to prominence, and they make deals with networks, and the networks give them commitments. So John Rich, being a legendary television director, everything from the Dick Van Dyke Show, and then he had a commitment. Henry Winkler, of course, because of his starring as the Fonz in Happy Days, along with Ron Howard. Henry was very smart. He parlayed his stardom power into a number of production deals. So Paramount and ABC took John Rich's deal and Henry's deal and kind of married them together and funneled MacGyver through that. So John and Henry were both executive producers. John really spent most of his time overseeing some of the directing aspects, since that was his bailiwick. And Henry kind of kept an eye overall. Henry was really delightful to work with, and we became friends. And then years later, I was developing a pilot with Henry for NBC based on a true story. But Henry was fun because he would always come by to make sure everybody was doing well. He'd shake everybody's hand, make sure you were happy. And what was great about Henry is that he wanted to make sure that MacGyver stayed true to the core essence of the character. But he also was a very good executive producer in that he didn't get in the way of the people who were running the show day to day, and I was one of those people. He was like a Grant Tinker. I learned from Grant Tinker that the greatest executives, executive producers, work as like downfield blockers with the network to keep problems away from the key people who are actually doing the series. And Henry was great at that. He knew that he had helped bring aboard people who really know what they were doing. He really felt that I knew what I was doing, and really did not get in the way of the day-to-day activities. He always wanted to make sure that the series was staying its course. But whenever we had a challenge with the network, Henry was right there, and he was very sharp, and he knew how to handle the network with both strength and humor and kindness. And so it was a lot of fun to work with Henry on that. And Richard Dean Anderson, wow, what a delightful human being and hard worker. I can't say enough good things about Ricky Dean.
Yeah, that's good. So what's the genesis of Return to Horror High? That had an interesting kind of gestation and birth all its own. Doing television shows we had become friends with Greg Sims, who is executive producer of Return to Horror High, and Greg was then and still is a very good talent manager. And a lot of the people that are in Return to Horror High were his clients. I happen to think they were terrific actors, so I had no problem. He wanted to see how many of his clients could be put in the film. I had no problem with that because I really liked them. But Greg was... what happened was that Greg and I and my then partner Mark had become friends, and we were actually developing a pilot for Nancy McKeon later. Nancy McKeon was his client, who was one of the stars of Facts of Life. And Greg, he and his friend Dana Escalante had written this horror script, and it was a real slasher script. And Greg said, "Hey, you want to make this movie with me?" Because he knew I wanted to direct, and I was looking for projects to direct, and I was writing some stuff that I could direct, and then Mark and I were both writing that. We were hoping that Mark would produce, I would direct, and we'd start doing feature films. So Greg sent us this script, and I read it, and didn't fully connect with the whole sense of that script, but there was one part of the script that I really loved, and because it was funny, but it was also scary, with tongue surgically sewn in cheek, and that's the sequence with Vince Edwards, the biology teacher, who ends up kind of getting dissected, and that part of Greg and Dana's script kind of made me laugh because I saw some real visual opportunities for it, but I also liked the kind of tongue-in-cheek tone that they had. And that ended up giving me the idea for what became Return to Horror High, of this film within a film, this film crew who comes to Crippen High School to make a film of the mysterious murders that ended up closing down the school. So I called Greg on the phone and I told him what I liked about his and Dana's script, and I told him my idea. And
Craig laughed and said, "That's fabulous." He said, "You want to run with that?" He said, "Yeah, just go write it." Because Greg had no ego involved in that. He just wanted to make a film with us, and the horror category was chosen. Greg has always he's had a fondness for that category, but it was also chosen because at that time, and still today, for emerging new filmmakers, that is a way to get an opportunity to make a film because you can keep the budget lower, and the studios and distribution companies know that if you get the right elements in it, you keep the budget low, they're going to at least break even and quite possibly make a nice little profit.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a lower risk venture for them, and studios, networks, corporations, they are all relatively risk averse. So I looked at this and thought, hey, I want to get my feature directing debut going here. This would be an opportunity to do that. So ended up coming up with this script. Talked about it with Greg and with Mark, and we all loved it. And we, through Greg, we took the script to New World Pictures. Mm-hmm. And a man named Roger Froehlich, a really good guy, was the CEO of New World at the time. And his executives had read the script, really liked it, so they were interested in going forward, but they knew I wanted to direct it. That was part of the deal. Greg was going to executive produce. My partner at the time, Mark, was going to produce. They knew that Greg was going to help pull in some interesting cast members, which we certainly did. And I can remember sitting in that meeting in New World, and Roger Froehlich looked directly at me and said, "Okay, we know you guys have done good television productions and know how to handle productions." And he looked at me dead in the eye and he said, "Well, why should I let you direct this film since you haven't directed a feature film before?" He knew I had directed some stage plays and small documentaries, but nothing on the Hollywood scale. Mm-hmm. And I took a breath and looked him straight in the eye back, and I said, "Roger, we're going to keep the budget of this film under $1 million. If we do that, and if you guys leave us alone and don't get in the way and bog us down," I said, "even if I deliver you 2 hours of fogged film, you're still going to be able to make a profit on this because it's in the horror genre." And he paused, and then he laughed, and he said, "You know, you're right. Go ahead. You got a green light." So that's how that started. And
that worked.
True to his word, and the executives who worked there, they were very helpful. They stayed out of the way, but they also lended help when we needed it, because they were pretty much focused from a production concern standpoint on two big budget films that they were doing at the time. Wanted Dead or Alive, starring Rutger Hauer,
right,
and Death Before Dishonor, starring
Fred Dreyer. Fred Dreyer, yeah.
Or of the Hunter series. And so they really spent their time focusing on that and really let us go. So we had a great time making that film. What happened when we finished it, part of this still doesn't sit well with Greg or myself or the partner, is we finished the film, we showed it to the executives and Roger, and they all loved it. And they started coming up with a great advertising campaign because they knew and understood that this was a comedy horror film. Mm-hmm. But that hadn't really been done before in this fashion. This was prior to the Scary Movies series of films, and,
right,
and prior to the Scream series. In fact, this film sometimes has been credited with inspiring them to do something.
I agree.
But because it was so new and different, and if you have, I think you've seen the film, so
yep,
you know that it is a twisting trip in and out of reality and illusion, and sometimes you don't necessarily know that you're in the film within the film, or in the film,
yeah,
or in the and that was by intent. I wanted to have fun with that and keep people guessing happened was that New World created a wonderful advertising and marketing campaign, and were ready to really distribute it live. They thought, and this was great. I was over the moon about it. They thought they really had something on their hands here, because it was so different. A lot of times, a lot of film and television executives get real nervous when something is too different. But New World was like, hey, let's go for it. Well, then, what happened is that Roger Froelich left the company to go on to greener pastures, so to speak. And a man named Bob Rennie came in to take over. Mm-hmm. And his thought about the whole process was exactly the opposite. He wanted to release it as a straight, thematic horror film. To their credit, the executives underneath him pushed back and said they didn't think that was great, but he overruled everybody, because he said he wanted to put all their effort and money into Wanted Dead or Alive and Death Before Dishonor. So they pulled back the number of theaters that they were going to release it in, and they put out a marketing and promotional campaign that was less involved and also a little more straightforward. So, two funny things happened when all those movies were released. Their big budget Wanted Dead or Alive and Death Before Dishonor films did not do well at the box office. When Return to Horror High opened, we were selling out every single theater in every region of the country that it opened in. Mm-hmm. There were lines of because what started happening, and this still today blows my mind, we were getting really good reviews. And at that time, nobody really reviewed horror films because they weren't taken all that seriously, except by film aficionados, except by people like yourself and other fans who really loved it. But but a lot of the film community did not take them very seriously. Wes Craven started to change that with his Freddy's the Nightmare on Elm Street series, because he's a very good filmmaker. And some other filmmakers clearly started to change that perception. So that has changed to this day. But then, it was different. So it was mind-blowing that we were getting good reviews from Tom Shales at the Washington Post, and reviews out of Hollywood Reporter and Variety and other newspapers across the country, because they never even reviewed horror films. So we kept getting people. Greg was inundated with calls to his office of people saying, where can we see this movie in other theaters, and why are the theaters not keeping it there long enough? Well, that's because New World, under then Bob Rennie, didn't allow it to stay in the theaters that long, because they were putting all their money behind the other two films. So it did extremely well in the theaters that it was released in, and then became one of New World's biggest video and DVD sales films through the years, and it now has finally achieved, I think, some level of kind of cult classic status.
Oh yeah, I promoted this interview last night, and a lot of people, was excited. A lot of people liked that movie.
Oh, that's really great to hear. And I know you had Lori Lathine on your show.
Yes.
And Lori was terrific. She was one of Greg Sims' clients at the time. And Lori had already done some very fine work in other films.
Another horror, too.
Really great television. And so I was very pleased to have her aboard. And we had a good time working together with everybody. And George Clooney, obviously a lot of people point out the fact this was one of his very first feature films. I think the first one might have been Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
One of the sequels,
yeah. That was first, and Return to Horror High second, or vice versa, I'm not sure. But George was, I know I sound like I've just worked with delightful people. That's not entirely the case. I can tell you some dark stories too, but George was, he was wonderful. He was already, at that time, I think George was only 24 in Return to Horror High, but he already had quite a number of television credits. Things. He was kind of a semi-regular co-star on The Facts of Life that starred Nancy McKeon. That was Greg Sims' connection to George, and George graced us funny George Clooney that you see today. He was fun and funny on set. He was extremely professional and really good. And I think all of us knew that, if George could hang in there through the ups and downs of the beginning of one's Hollywood career, things at some point were going to crack open for him, and they sure did when he got ER, which I thought was kind of an interesting coincidence, because his character in Return to Horror High, leaves the movie because he gets a television series. But George had already done a number of credits. But I know that at the time he was frustrated that he was not getting some of the type of jobs that he had hoped for, something that had a little more substance and depth. And one of the things I've always been grateful for is his level of professionalism and his just outright kindness. So here he comes aboard and agrees to do Return to Horror High. He knew it was a comedy spoof of horror films, but still in the horror genre. But he also knew this was a low-budget, independent film, so a lot of people probably might not take it too seriously. But he was really a top-notch pro. He did not hold back because he was on this little film. So he was, and that shows you the type of guy he is. And I have such respect for him because I see how he has not only handled his career, but how he has handled stardom, how he has handled the power and the money and the fame that come to you from mega stardom like he has achieved. He and his dad have risked their lives going into the Sudan to try to make a difference there. And when I grew up in Pittsburgh, I used to, his dad was on television and radio, and I would watch his dad's stuff, so I thought it was very interesting that, I ended up working with George Clooney when he was a young guy, and I was a young guy. But I have the utmost respect for George. He's very smart and very talented, as you all know. But I am particularly impressed by how he has maintained his kindness and his sense of humor through the years. Because in dealing with many movie stars and many television stars through the decades now, you meet all kinds of people. Becoming friends with Paul Newman was a thrill, and he's just a great guy. There are some other stars that I knew and worked with, though, that probably wouldn't, didn't mind, like, never working with them again.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I've been very fortunate. Most of the people that I've worked with and been involved with have been really cool people.
Yeah, Laurie told me Vince Edwards was a little cranky.
Yeah, Vince was, he was a little cranky for a while. In fact, sometimes the crew got a little annoyed with him. But since I just told you the story about George and his attitude, this kind of dovetails right into that. Vince Edwards, when he came aboard this show, Vince Edwards had been a very big star in television by starring in a series called Ben Casey, M.D.
Right.
And he had also been a movie star. So for somebody who had achieved that level of success and that level of fame and stardom, to find himself in a low-budget, independent comedy spoof of horror films can sometimes get to somebody's ego.
Yeah.
And I think Ben was initially, for a while, he was not happy about that. He liked getting a paycheck, and he liked working, as do all actors. They want to have the opportunity to express their talent and do a role. And that's why we all do what we do. I mean, I love writing, I love directing, I love producing, and I've done some acting, and I've loved that. You want to have the chance and the opportunity to do that, to express yourself. So I think I kind of got that and sensed that, because I knew that he was professional, and I knew he had talent. And he was someone who took this also as a favor to Greg Sims. And I thought, given the nature of the film we were doing, that I was lucky to have somebody who had name value. glad to have someone who had the kind of track record that Froehlich did. But he was cranky, and so a couple people on the crew said, well, Jesus, do we really have to work with this guy? But because I kind of figured out where Vince was coming from, I would sit down and talk with him. I would give him the time and respect to listen to him. And when he realized that I knew what I was doing and that I had a vision, and it was a clear vision of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to go about it, and when I explained even some of the shots and the rhythm of the sequence to him and talked thoroughly to him about his character, he started warming up. He started realizing, okay, I'm not really on a schlock production here. I can take this seriously because these people know what they're doing. Our director of photography, our cinematographer, Roy Wagner, is one of the best there is. And Roy had already done Nightmare on Elm Street, and Witchboard, and some other, and Roy has gone on to win Emmy Awards and other awards. He's an amazing director of photography. We had fun, really fun working together because Roy and I shared a similar sense of humor. But Roy really took the work seriously, and I think that also helped Vince Edwards kind of relax.
Yeah.
And at times I think, Roy's good humor probably helped him. So ultimately, even though there were some rough patches in the beginning, I enjoyed working with him, and I know that he ultimately enjoyed working. But yes, Roy was right. There were some bumpy parts in that road in the beginning.
Yeah. I also interviewed Darcy DeMoss, who played Sherry Haynes in the movie. She didn't remember anything about the movie because she was only a day player. Someone had told me that she was kind of a diva, but when I interviewed her, I had a lot of fun with her.
Well, Darcy did have, she was on the film for one day, but I needed somebody who, she had such a great look, very pretty young woman when we were looking for that character. But I wanted somebody who had an effervescent kind of energy about them, but with a little bit of a snappy attitude. And because the scene is relatively quick, and I wanted someone who could kind of capture that whole persona, kind of almost instantly, and someone who would also be uninhibited, because this was a shot where her cheerleader sweater gets pulled up, and there's a little bit of nudity that New World wanted in the film, and in this genre, it's almost obligatory that you provide something like that. But I wanted to do it hopefully in a humorous way, in a way with the high school kids kind of fooling around. And Darcy was a great trooper, and she went on to do some very nice roles in other things. She was easy to work with. And the funniest thing I remember about Darcy was that, and she clearly was very uninhibited about, as an actress, with, whether you had your costume on or whether your costume was, lifted off, well, part of the job, being a professional. But she had a real great sense of humor about it. And she came into my office during pre-production, and she said to me, I'm a little worried about my scene. And I said, well, Darcy said, we'll make sure that we clear the set of everybody except the essential people. And she said, oh, hell, I'm not concerned about that. She said, here's what I'm concerned about. She said, I think my left breast is better looking than my right breast. And I want to make sure you've got the right angle on this. And she was sure that, see what I mean? And I said, well, I was kind of started to blush, and I said, well, actually, I think they're both lovely, but if you like the left better than the right, I'll set it up so that you can have your left side. And then that's what we did. And when she walked out, she was just as funny and easy to work with as could be. And then when she walked out, I thought to myself, oh my God, what a great profession. But that was all on her own. That was all on her own doing. She was not required to come in and do that. But I thought it was quite funny that she did. And I realized, well, this is an actor uninhibited. I will not have a problem with that on the set.
How about Chris?
And actually, at that time, Ron Howard had given me a little bit of advice. He said, I know it might be embarrassing. He said, it was embarrassing for me. He said, but, when you hire somebody who's going to have, like, partial nudity, or if it's a female character that's going to have partial nudity, he said, sometimes they'll submit pictures in bikinis.
Yeah.
He said, you really have to know what somebody looks like before you are on the set, because otherwise there might be problems. And he said he discovered when he was doing Night Shift with Henry Winkler and Michael Keaton that there was a party sequence, because they were in that film. Henry Winkler and Michael Keaton are working in a morgue, but Henry Winkler is also like an accountant, and they do the night shift, and Henry starts doing, I guess, starts helping some of the call girls that Michael Keaton, I guess, befriends, and they have a party there at one point, and in that party sequence, apparently, there's some semi-nudity, and Ron said, he said it was a little embarrassing at times because there were some tattoos in the wrong place that caused some problem. They had to shift who was taking the shirt off and who wasn't. So he said he learned his lesson about that, and that was one thing that I had some advice on going into Return to Horror High about. And certainly, you as filmmakers, as artists, as professionals, you want to stay and remain professional about how all that is handled, because it is part of the job if it's not improperly, gratuitous, which happens in a lot of scripts and whatever. But if it's something that advances a character or a story, I think it's clearly appropriate, and it can be fun or funny or dramatic or serious or whatever the tone that's needed. But you always need to remember we're all professionals. The actors and the actresses, they are all professionals doing a job. And with actors and actresses, sometimes as the character, clothes are on, clothes are off. That is the costume of the day, but they are there to do a job, to be professionals. And so most people I know in the business handled those things really well. Sadly and tragically, there were people like Harvey Weinstein, that we know, with the power that he obtained, who did a lot of terrible things. And there were others who did that too. I mean, the whole casting couch scenario in Hollywood had a lot of truth to it, sadly. And people needed to be aware of that. But on Return to Horror High, thankfully, we had none of those problems, and we had good, both serious people and very good humorous people about that.
There was a movie in the 70s called Horror High. Did you run into any legal trouble over the title?
No, we didn't. Probably one of the reasons is you cannot copyright a title. There are a number of, when you look through the filmography of everything that's ever been made, there are a number of films that have similar titles. There are certain films that you wouldn't want to trespass on them. You're not going to do Gone with the Wind about a bunch of teenage boys in a farting contest. You're not going to get away with something like that. But you technically cannot copyright a title. And the fact that Return to Horror High is a humorous indication that we were doing the sequel before the original, we thought was kind of fun. In our title, in the sense that it's a sequel.
Yeah. I read that there was trouble with the MPAA over the teacher's heart scene, which, by the way, I think is one of the best scenes in any movie.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We did have a challenge with them there, and we had to very carefully. We talked to them extensively. I made a few little snips here and there, juxtaposed something a little differently to try to keep, the essence of what I thought really worked. And eventually, the combination of them finally relenting and us at least respecting their desire to protect people's sensibilities out there. They let us go forward with what we have. I always liked Jack Nicholson's comment, which I thought went right to the heart of some of the cultural challenges we have in our country when it comes to films and the depiction of elements in films. With the rating board, and most of them do try to do their best to give a rating so that parents can have some kind of decision-making apparatus as to whether they think it's appropriate for their kids to see a movie or not, or whether they might need to see the movie with their kids if they can go, to a movie like that. And obviously, parents' sensibilities about that are all across the board. But Jack Nicholson, because in some of his films, they ran into problems with the motion picture rating board, and most of us have at one time or another, and sometimes the feedback we get doesn't make any sense to us. But the thing he said was, it's clear, and this was many years ago when he said this, he said, it's clear with the motion picture rating board that in this country, you can slice off a breast, but you can't expose it. You can't kiss it. But you can, in other words, you can be violent to characters and have all sorts of blood and guts and gore on the screen. But they get real nervous when it gets around to nudity and, depiction of human sex in scenes. And I think some of that goes to the heart of the fact that, we originally were a nation established by a lot of the original Puritans, and some of that has continued through our society. Obviously, things have changed, and we see a lot more of all sorts of things now. But when we were making Return to Horror High, you were spot on, Tommy. We had a problem with that scene. Funnily, they didn't have, in this film, they didn't have any problem with the very brief nudity. But they did with the teacher sequence, and I feel kind of lucky that we were able to get that through, because for the type of film that it was, I do think that was a good sequence.
It is a very good sequence. Was the killer's mask based on Michael Myers?
No. That wasn't the intent. That was a mask that I think was kind of... Greta Gregorian was our art director, and our head of prop master was Batia Grafka. And I think it came out of something that they had found. And they showed it to me, and I went, ooh, that looks kind of creepy. I like that. But there wasn't an intent. The intent was not to try to do a Michael Myers thing.
Mm-hmm. You went back to television, but did you try to make more theatrical movies?
I did, and actually I'm in the process now of continuing to do that. For those of your listeners who are interested in jumping into the entertainment business, or even those of your listeners who are in the entertainment business, they will know that it's very challenging to get films off the ground.
Yeah.
Because the television and motion picture business exist at the crossroads of art and commerce. And sometimes it's not just showbiz, it's the business of show. And we certainly today have gotten to the point where it is much more corporate than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And the old statement of the golden rule, he who has the gold rules, there's still a lot of truth in that. It was very challenging to get films off the ground. There were a couple of films that I was actually attached to direct, and they fell apart right before going to start production, and were not able to be resurrected. And that's a very frustrating thing. I am continuing to write screenplays of various natures. In fact, on my website, I've just started a new website. I have a number of those scripts up to alert, the production and producing community of what's available. For the last this is the true story based on the life and work of renowned, world-renowned veterinarian and equine behaviorist Dr. Robert Miller, who helped to establish the scientific basis for natural horsemanship, and based on the work activity of people like Tom Dorrance and Bill Dorrance and Ray Hunt, if anyone's in the horse community out there. And Dr. Miller is also world famous for laying down the scientific principles behind imprinting, which is how you can get a horse when it's just been born to start bonding to you and become an easier creature to deal with, because they're flight animals and we are predators, and therefore you need to be very careful around horses and find a way to bond. But it's his life is a fascinating story. It's kind of part of it is kind of like that the best-selling books, All Creatures Great and Small, because he had a vet business where he was involved with all sorts of wild and exotic animals in Thousand Oaks, California, many years ago. And there was a place called Jungle Land there, and there was a lion farm, and these were places that loaned a lot of trained animals to the motion picture business and television business. Mm-hmm. And he ended up being the vet for all of these, as well as horses. And so I got involved, a single kind of angel investor, entrepreneur, financier, whose current business was in the horse world, came to me and said he wanted to make a movie of honoring this man's life. And so he turned to me to make it. So I got paid to write the script, and we started moving into pre-production. Brought aboard Victoria Burrows and Scott Boland, top casting directors who do most of Robert Zemeckis' films, and they worked with Spielberg and many others, and brought Peter Burrell, great line producer, on board, who's won Golden Globes and Emmys, and we started location scouting. We budgeted, we made a shooting schedule, and we started to reach out on casting. Ended up having a nice conversation with Kevin Costner. Viggo Mortensen was really interested for a while until he stepped away because his parents had been ill and he wanted to help them out. When he came back into the business, he did a nice little film called Green Book. Did you ever see Green Book?
Green Book, no.
The Academy Award-winning film. So we were dealing with trying to nail down a particular star, and I was just about to make an offer to Greg Kinnear when some of the financial elements of the picture fell apart. So at that point, it was 2+ years of work that kind of went down the drain. Only down the drain to the point where you're kind of back to the drawing board. So I'm now seeking additional production financing. And this is the way it's been through the years. So I've been very grateful for the fact that television turned out to be a very steady open door for me for quite a long time. And I had my ups and downs in that. And I'm continuing to work to try to get feature films off the ground, both as a writer, sometimes as a writer-director, sometimes as a writer-producer, and sometimes just as a writer. And but for creative fun and branching out, I'm also writing novels now.
Nice. You got anything in the works of novels?
I do. I've got one. I'm moving on two at the same time right now. They're both actually interesting. One is kind of a romantic cat and mouse heist thriller, and the other is a much more sociologically driven drama thriller with a bunch of characters who end up in a combustible situation. But they all have something to say about the human condition and relationships, which is something that really interests and intrigues me because I'm trying to figure it out myself. But I am enjoying the process of writing novels. For one, you don't have to deal with budgets and studios and networks that want to give you all sorts of different notes. You don't have to deal with because some of the most fun that I have is through the business years in showbiz is when I've been on sets with the cast and crew. And to me, that's always been like a big playground. It's like being in a sandbox. In fact, one of your guests that you had on, because I was listening delightfully so to some of your podcasts, Brian Trenchard Smith is someone that I know.
Oh, yeah.
And had actually, interestingly enough, I had written a couple episodes of a series called Time Tracks and a series called Silk Stockings, and he directed episodes of both those series. But I met Brian, actually, when we were both walking our dogs in the neighborhood where we both lived, and we met each other and discovered, we're both in the same business. So we struck up a bit of a friendship. He was quite an interesting character. Really liked him. Mm-hmm. And boy, what a long resume he has. You got a very nice podcast with him. Enjoyed listening to that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, he was. I enjoyed him a lot. I like interviewing those British guys because they just talk so philosophically about film, unlike a lot of American directors and stuff. I talked to an American director the other day who shall remain nameless. My listeners can go find him because it's just a couple days ago. He was just a pompous prick to me, but I love talking to the British directors. They're great.
Yeah, there's a different. For most of the Brits that I have worked with or met, there's a different kind of professional perception and demeanor that they have. And the one thing that's great to me, I have always been just thrilled with the English accent, the British accent. I've always felt, if someone's going to swear at me, I want them to do it either with a British accent or in French, because it sounds really good. And one of my funny first connections along that line, when I was in the mailroom at Universal, I was trying to get into the business out of the mailroom, obviously, in any way that I could. And what we would do with the mail is the mail would come into this mobile home trailer that was on the lot, on the studio lot, and we would sort all the mail into these different slots that went to all the various buildings and all the various offices. And then we would all kind of span out, pushing these baskets full of mail wrapped with rubber bands and whatever, and some of us were to some of the outlying areas on the studio lot, because Universal was huge. We would drive golf carts with the mail in boxes. So again, you were meeting everybody. Well, I also, realized, okay, I've got to get out of the mailroom quickly, because this is not what I want as a career, because you only did minimum wage.
Yeah.
And but it was a great opportunity to meet people. So I had written a treatment for a feature film. Unfortunately, later for me, the feature film it's really a great story. I'm actually doing a novel on it now. But it was based somewhat loosely on true story elements that I then fictionalized part of it, set in India and England in the 1890s and 1910s. So it's this big production, right? Mm-hmm. But I wrote this, what I felt was a really cool treatment. And I ended up befriending Burt Lancaster, who had an office on the lot. And he read the treatment, really liked it, said I could use his name as far as him being interested in playing one of the parts, a part that I had approached him about trepidatiously, because here's this, legendary movie star, and I'm this kid in the mailroom asking him to read my treatment, and would he be interested in being in this project I was putting together. But, he kind of got a kick out of the fact that this kid was trying to put this thing together. And so he took me seriously, which I will always remember. And I became friends with him, and I was putting it together. And I noticed that Anthony Hopkins was coming on the studio lot to do a remake of the movie Dark Victory that had originally starred Bette Davis.
Yeah.
And now was going to star Tony Hopkins and Elizabeth Montgomery. So I looked at the call sheets for the studio productions that day, and I saw the sound stage that he was on, and I walked on the sound stage, and I waited until there was a break in the filming, and I walked up to him with a copy of his treatment, and I introduced myself, and I said that I'm a young filmmaker working here on the lot. I said, I didn't tell him initially that I was in the mailroom. And I said, I've written this treatment and I've written this role for you. Would you be interested in reading this? I said, Burt Lancaster has already read this and has agreed to be part of it. And Anthony Hopkins, this was prior to a lot of things that he had done, but I had seen, when I was in college, I saw a 12-part BBC production of War and Peace that he was in, playing Count Pierre Bezuhoff, one of the lead characters in War and Peace, and I thought he was phenomenal. I said to myself, who the hell is this actor? And then I started seeing him in other things. So he was clearly on the rise when I met him, but he was not the superstar that he currently is today.
Yeah.
As far as fame and influence in the business, but everybody was like, this guy's really going somewhere. And I think when I met him, he was probably when he was mid-30s, because I was like 22 or something.
Yeah.
At that time, 20. Well, now what was I then? I was 22, 23, and and he said, "Oh my goodness, well, yes, I'd love to read. No one's ever written a part for me before." He said, "I'm quite flattered. Thank you so much." And of course, he said that with his lovely accent, and so I gave him my phone number at the mailroom. And then when he called like 2 days later, and during that phone call, I had to explain that I actually, I worked in the mailroom. He said, "Oh, I don't really care. This is wonderful. I have to do this with you and Mr. Lancaster, Burt Lancaster."
Yeah.
And he really got involved with this project. So I remember going out to dinner with him and with another friend of his and somebody that I had met that he had worked with, and sitting next to him, and we were talking, and I was just enthralled with his accent. And there were a couple words that I started picking up on and saying in a British accent because his accent was just so great.
Yeah.
And he looked at me at one point. He said, "Are you trying to mimic me?" I said, No. I said, it just kind of slips out. And I told him that when I was a little boy, my parents suddenly discovered that for about 6 months I started speaking with a British accent. They don't know where the hell it came from. So I tried to use that excuse as to embarrass it.
Yeah.
So I've always, loved the British accent. It sounds so much more intelligent than many of our American accents. And as you can imagine, Anthony Hopkins was a really nice man to deal with, and very excited, obviously, what has happened with his career, and thoroughly enjoyed his performances through the years. And
He's extraordinary, yes.
The project that he and Burt Lancaster committed to, I worked on for quite a while, but I was actually too young and too naive to be able to pull off what was a really big budget international shoot of a film. I just wasn't fully ready to be able to put all the pieces together. But that helped open up some other doors later on. So, it all has a purpose. Everything falls in line at some place.
It certainly did. I wanted to ask you really quickly, you produced, wrote, and directed episodes of Freddy's Nightmares, and I've interviewed a lot of people who were on there, including an actor you directed, Chris Nash.
Yes. Yeah.
How was that experience overall?
Overall, it was exhausting, and I will tell you why. But it was probably some of the most fun that I have had. Freddy's Nightmares was. It's funny. The first season of Freddy's Nightmares, the executive producer was Jeff Froelich, and I'm Bill Froelich. So it seemed like you have to have a similar name like that to do that show.
Yeah.
Jeff did the first season, and this was done through Lorimar, and it was a first-run syndication season. And during the second season, when they began the second season, they realized the second season was going to be the last, but they wanted to do it in a way that they could make a lot of money for it.
Yeah.
So I was brought in and asked to take over Freddy's Nightmares, and it was right at the very beginning of the season. And they only had one script, and they had one story, and this was a 22-episode order. And here's how they wanted to do the show. It was an hour show, but they wanted each hour to be composed of a standalone half hour. But those half hours had to connect and make a cohesive hour. So that the storyline had to be something that followed throughout the hour, but that each of the half hours could stand alone and be shown out of order. And then they wanted each of those hours to hook up with another hour that had the same breakup of 2 half hours. And they wanted those 2-hour segments to be able to form a 2-hour movie, because they wanted to distribute this series either as in half-hour time slots, and they wanted to be able to distribute them out of order if necessary. They also wanted to distribute them in an hour time slot, and they wanted to sell it overseas and even here as little 2-hour movies. So that was an enormous undertaking of trying to figure out how those stories all dovetail together. It was also an enormous undertaking on trying to figure out the production. How do we hang on to the sets and the locations and everything else? How do we use that? Because some of these half hours that had to hook up with other half hours, they were not done all back to back. In other words, episodes, because of the nature of how we were doing it, sometimes episodes 2 and 4 might hook up with episode 7 and episode 9. I mean, the production logistics were nuts. It was just crazy. But the thing that I told the studio is I told them, I said, I know that I can figure out how to help you get out of this mess, because they were going to be way behind in budget because they were way behind in scripts, and they were getting ready to start production. They only had one script. And that's lethal and deadly when you begin a television series. So I told them, I said, I can get you out of this, but I have to have complete creative control over this. If you guys want to give me notes, that's fine, but you got to give me notes on time, and then I'll deal with the notes that I think work, because I can't hesitate. I can't allow the bottleneck of decisions to back up, or you guys are just going to end up, we're going to end up spending way too much money. So the head of the studio at the time had known me for quite a while and said, okay, go ahead. And so I said, and the other thing I want to do is I want to keep, the nature of Freddy's Nightmares and all that, but I also want to be able to add in some kind of black humor, some Hitchcockian elements, and maybe a little touch of Twilight Zone. And they said, yeah, go ahead. As long as you stay within budget, you have complete creative control. Well, that had only happened to me with Return to Horror High. So having complete creative control was a blast.
Yeah.
I was able to pull in a lot of friends as actors and people who wouldn't necessarily do a show like this, but I said to them, look, you're going to be able to do some strange characters you'll never be able to do in another project. Come have some fun with us. Come play. Because, we all consider a lot of this being professionals in a little sandbox with our toys. And we can't believe we get paid to do it. So Freddy's Nightmares was, I don't know if I slept for the entire season, but it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of creative, inventive decision that went into from my writing staff and from the directors we brought aboard, and episodes that I was able to direct. It was great fun, but enormously challenging. And one little tidbit gives you some insight into the entertainment business from that show. We were doing our shows, but we were doing them on a shooting schedule of 4 or 5 days. At that time, that was 3 or 4 days or 5 days less than what most television series, hour-long, were shooting. And we had a budget that was 1/3 of everybody else's series. So when we were able to do this, and we were coming in on time and on budget for the most part, all the studios sent production executives over to meet with me to find out how the hell were we doing this, because when the shows came on and aired, we were beating the competition. Well, they had to go back to their bosses and explain, well, the reason that they're able to move so quickly and so efficiently is that they don't have to deal with any of us. They didn't like the fact.
Yeah.
The answer was that some of their jobs were somewhat superfluous. So that wasn't taken very well. But, and that's not to say that all executives' jobs are superfluous. That's not entirely true. But the system does get bogged down with all the people who are required to insert their opinions and comments, and you get a lot of hands in the soup. So sometimes the fewer hands, if those are responsible hands in the soup, the more efficient you can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And how surreal was it to direct Tony Dow?
That was a lot of fun. I mean, as your listeners may know, Tony Dow is one of the great stars of the classic series Leave It to Beaver. And Tony was a very humorous guy, very good, but very kind of had a very kind of what I would call a very soft, pleasant sense of humor. He didn't take himself too seriously, but he took acting seriously, and he wanted to be really good with it. And he didn't want to be, it was a challenge for him to keep breaking out of the image of being Beaver's older brother. So he said that was something that sometimes got under his skin. So to break the ice in that episode, it starred Tony Dow, and it starred Sandahl Bergman, who some of your listeners may know as the female lead in the original Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Sandahl was a fantastic dancer, and in the Bob Fosse film All That Jazz, she is the lead dancer in a sequence called Air Erotica, and you can see how fabulous she is as a dancer. So Sandahl and she was already a star in her own right when she came aboard Freddy's Nightmares. And Amy Linden was a comedian actress who was also in this. So when Tony arrived for his first day of shooting, I said, okay, I got to break the ice for this guy. So when he came out of on the soundstage, when he came out of the makeup and wardrobe area, I had the entire crew lined up like a gauntlet, like walking down a hallway of people like a gauntlet. And we all started whistling the theme to Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah.
And he just stopped and looked at all of us, and then he laughed, and that kind of broke the ice, and he knew that he was welcome as an actor and not just as Beaver's big brother.
Yeah.
So we kind of, I didn't sidestep it. I kind of took the bull by the horns and went right after it. And he was fun to work with. And it was I don't know if you saw that episode. It's still out there somewhere in reruns or DVDs.
I probably did.
This was an episode where the three of them are recovering cannibals. And they are on the wagon trying not to eat people. And this was clearly a comedy, this episode. And they were quite good in it.
Yeah, you also had Babs from Animal House, I see.
Yes, yeah.
Martha Smith.
In the same episode. Martha Smith. Well, I was friends with Martha because Martha was one of the co-stars of Scarecrow and Mrs. King. And I produced the second season of Scarecrow and Mrs. King. That starred Kate Jackson as Mrs. King and Bruce Boxleitner as Scarecrow. Bruce and Martha were great to work with. Been friends with both since. Kate was a little challenging. She had some personal challenges of her own. So that was one of those stories where you go, okay, maybe we don't need to work with her again.
Yeah.
But Martha was, and Martha is as funny as can be. and you know, a lot of people a lot of the crew were on the set. They would keep listening. Hey, that's Babs from Animal House.
I almost interviewed her in 2018, and then she had hip surgery, so hopefully I'll get to interview her in the future.
If you ever get a chance, please say hello to her for me. And you can remind her of her journey through Freddy's nightmares with me in that crazy episode, and
of course,
also Scared Columbus, because she is a delight and a very sharp and smart woman.
Awesome. Awesome.
So I hope you get a chance to have a chat with her. And your listeners will, I think, really like a lot of her stories. And she probably has some whoppers of stories from Animal House filming.
Yeah. So
I've heard some of those stories because Bruce McGill from Animal House is a good friend of mine, and Tim Matheson from Animal House is a friend. And some of the stories that I've heard from those two guys, and Peter Rieger became, I don't know Peter all that well, but one of my favorite films, Local Hero, stars Burt Lancaster and Peter Rieger, so that was fun. But Tim and Bruce, I've heard some really funny stories from them through the years.
yeah, every teen movie story I hear, it involves cocaine and partying at the hotel, you know, after the day is over.
Well, apparently there were some strange, sometimes out of control parties that happened, but that was a good group of people. I was able to hire Bruce McGill for MacGyver, playing a great episode called Jack of Lies that was written by two of our young staff members at the time, Carrie Lenhart and John Sackmore, who did a great script, and Bruce just nailed the character so much. Our hope was, and it turned out to be true, we wanted to bring that character back as every once in a while as a recurring character, and we were able to do that. Bruce he's terrific. He's one of the, people will call him a character actor, but he's just flat out one of the best actors out there. And he's also a hell of a golfer.
Oh, yeah?
I lost quite a few golf bets to him through the years.
Yeah, he was great on MacGyver. He was like Stuart Margolin on the Rockford Files, just that con artist type of guy.
Yeah, that's a good connection. Yes, that was a great character that Stuart Margolin played on Rockford Files.
Yeah, Angel. So during this time of quarantine, you're doing a lot of writing for your novel?
Yes. Well, I'm plowing ahead on. I put one novel kind of ahead of some of the others, but every once in a while I get ideas for the others, so I make notes. And there are also 2 feature screenplays that I'm in the process of finishing. So one of the things I'd like to do through the years, and I think it's my television training that's helped me do that. In television, many times you have to write very quickly, and you're writing on more than one script at once. So I'm not just writing on the novel solely. I will write on the novel, and then if I need a kind of change of pace, I'll open up one of the screenplays I'm working on, and that allows me to kind of refresh my head, kind of like hitting the refresh screen button on your computer. I do that with my sense of creativity because I get to shift gears.
Yeah.
So I am working on novels, but I'm continuing to. I love working in the screenplay form. It's very challenging. You really have to condense things down to their essence, and that's why I like the opposite freedom that a novel can give you. You can expand. You can go deeper. There are similarities in some of the writing, but there are also clear differences, and I like experiencing those differences. It brings a variety to the creativity.
Yeah, I've been screenwriting for years. Haven't sold anything yet, but I don't give up hope.
Well, that's good, because that is the thing that ultimately will allow something to click in, and you never know when that is going to happen. I knew people who for years tried selling scripts, and then all of a sudden one just caught on, and then because they had a pile of scripts that they had written, when they got a stamp of approval on one script, and somebody else went, "Oh, you sold that script," and they said, "Well, do you have any more?" And they said, "Well, yeah, let me show you," and they would start selling more. I can remember a story that was told to me of there was a guy who was writing scripts, feature scripts, and all that. He'd been doing a lot of advertising writing to feed his family, and I was young at the time, but I was working on the television series, and a number of people writing feature scripts would try to get an episode of a television series to write because they knew at least it was probably going to be made, and they'd be able to see some of their writing on screen, because there were people that were in the film business actually making a lot of money writing feature scripts, getting paid really good money to write a feature script, but the feature script would never get made. And I've had feature scripts like that I wrote, got paid for, but it ultimately didn't get made. And it wasn't necessarily because these scripts that people were writing that they didn't like them. It's just, all sorts of decisions go into whether a film gets greenlit. But I heard this story that this particular guy was hoping to maybe try to get an episode of a television series. And then I was handed a script that he wrote. I looked at it and went, "Oh my God, this guy is great." Well, the next thing, Steven Spielberg read one of the scripts and helped put it together. Well, this guy was Larry Kasdan.
Oh, Lawrence Kasdan, yeah.
Lawrence Kasdan, went on to write
The Big Chill, Silverado, yeah.
Raiders of the Lost Ark, and write and direct Grand Canyon, and write and direct Body Heat, and
The Big Chill, Silverado, yeah.
Oh yeah. Silverado. He's one of the best. He's just a fabulous writer-director. And when I saw that, I would read this. I read the script and went, "Oh my God, this is great! I wish I'd written this." Yeah. And I looked at it and I said, "You're telling me this guy, isn't selling these scripts? That's nuts." But that tells you how crazy the film business can be. In fact, one day I was having lunch in a restaurant that had those, the curved red booths with high backs, and I was sitting down on one side, and I'm 6'4", so I'm tall, and I was listening to some guys having lunch on the other in this booth next to me, and a couple of voices sounded, familiar to me. I thought, do I know these people? I was listening to this one person talk about how challenging it was to get, this particular project through the studio system. So I decided, okay, I'm going to stand up and go to the restroom and see if I can cast a quick glance over there to see who this is. And I stood up, and I almost out loud said, "Holy shit," to myself, because it was Steven Spielberg. And I'd never met Spielberg, but, and the other people that were there were well known. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, if Steven Spielberg, one of the greatest of all time, is having a challenge getting something through the system, maybe I should relax a little and not be concerned that I'm having a rough time with certain projects. So I would tell you, Tommy, keep writing. If you love writing, if you need to get those stories out, just keep pouring that passion onto the page. Because at some point, it's going to click with somebody at the right time, the right place. And as you know, writing begets writing. And the more that you write, the better we get. So I would encourage you to, because you clearly have a passion for film and this business and a knowledge of things. So, man, just keep at it. That's great.
I will, yes. There's one particular one I wrote that I really want to get made, and before quarantine started, it looked like it could happen, but right now it's just everything's screwed up. But I'm going to keep doing it, keep trying, and I thank you so much for coming on today, Bill.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I thank you for inviting me, and if you and all your listeners care to at some point check out further things about what I'm doing, I have a new website that is billfroelich.com.
Nice.
And Froelich, not always the easiest name to spell, is Froehlich. hearing more of your podcast. You've got some really interesting guests that you chat with. So thank you for allowing me to be one of them. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate that a lot. I'll keep an eye out for your novels, too. And I hope you have a happy Easter, stay safe, and have a great rest of your day.
You also, you and your family also, and all your listeners, let's do our best by staying home, helping our frontline heroes in the healthcare system by us staying out of trouble with each other. So stay safe, and we will all come out of this.
Yes, we will. Okay, Bill, have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. Bill Froelich. Ain't he a cool dude? I like him a lot. Great stories. Great guy. Man, show business. What a roller coaster ride, hey? Finding out every day. Well, if you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Add me as a friend on Facebook. Join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all the time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Later, dudes!